Hey everybody, Matthew Perry here. We're going to continue to archive what we talked about at our leaders retreat in Trinidad and Tobago back on November the 2nd. And hopefully, if you happen to come across it, hopefully this will be of benefit to you. And so what I promised last week was that we would talk about navigating through change in an established church. And what I mean by established church is a church that's probably more than 10 years old. And by then, you've got a good infrastructure. You've got probably a pretty solid budget. By then, you've got some staff, maybe a lot of staff. And suddenly you make a transition from everything being outward to where now you've got to make sure you're taking care of the people that are on the inside. And again, that infrastructure needs to be in place. But sometimes there can be this switch to where the infrastructure and the institution begins to mean more than the mission. And that's where you've got to be really careful. And that's where change can be really difficult. Because when you spend a lot of time building something and you have a lot of people that are rolling up their sleeves and they're trying to make sure that this church will be able not only to get off the ground, but be able to not just survive, but thrive. Well, then you have some people now that are invested in this particular organization and in the church as well. And so when you begin to make changes, what can happen is that the changes can be sometimes seen as an indictment to those who implemented these things to begin with. And that's where you've got to be really careful. You've got to make sure that you're telling people that the changes are not because you thought that there was any malice or ill will in what was done before, but now we're here and we're seeing some things that need to be taken care of, and all of us have blind spots. And so when you have those blind spots, that's why we need each other. Proverbs 27:17 talks about that as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I hope I got that verse right, but that's the principle is there, is that as iron sharpens iron, we sharpen each other. And part of that sharpening is recognizing that we all don't have the same blind spots, but we all can come together to be able to move forward, remembering and embracing the mission of being and making and multiplying and sending hopeful, joyful disciples of Jesus. The goal is not simply to keep everybody comfortable on the inside, but to help everyone to be removed from an eternal discomfort on the outside. And we've got to be really on mission and on point about that. And so a long time ago, back on August 18th of 2015, I wrote a blog post called Navigating an Established Church Through Change. And I didn't write it because I'm really good at it. In fact, anytime you're a pastor or a leader in a church, you're going to come up against some obstacles that are going to be not only painful, but are also going to make you question whether you're the person to be able to do this. And that's where you've got to really rely on the calling of God. Change brings a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and it brings it even for the pastors. And the longer a pastor has been in the church, the more change is very, very difficult. We all love routine, but we have to come to that crisis point of, wait a minute, are we? Does the church now exclusively exist for us and our comfort? And so where we can go and have such a routine that we don't have to think about what we're doing? Or is there something else that's going on to where now we're realizing, okay, wait a minute. It's not even about our church surviving right now. It's about where we are in moving in God's kingdom and moving forward with what He has called us to do individually, corporately, and as partners in the kingdom. So what I want to do is just share with you 6 things. We're going to use it as the acronym of the word change, because there's 6 letters in the word change. So there's going to be 6 points. And one of the questions you have to ask when making change is thinking about the C, Christ and community. Do the changes help us better connect with Christ? And do the changes help us better connect with the needs that are going on in our community, with the people that are going on in our community? Man, church can become a holy huddle, and we can't do that. The church needs to be a Great Commission hub to where those spokes, and we're going out wherever we are, ready to share the gospel, not only with our lives, but especially with our words. The words give an articulation to our lives. That's what we got to be careful about. So that's C. Do they help us to do that? And you got to answer these questions. H, both head and heart. Do the changes connect with us personally in the head? Yes, I see up here, yes, these changes are needed, but also do they check with our heart? Are we emotionally and spiritually prepared and ready to make these changes if this is something we sense that will help advance the kingdom? Or is there something in us that's resisting them? If there's some resisting, don't automatically think that that resistance is there because it should be there. You've got to begin to ask yourself, why? Why am I having such a hard time with this? What kind of challenges are going to arise? Is there a threat that these challenges are going to pose to maybe our own comfort or maybe how we've always done things in the organization? Is the end result, I got to read this. Al, I heard what you said, but I want to make sure that I'm reading this right. Is the end result in our hearts worth the process of losing some of what we have now? So if we have to lose some to gain more, lose some of ourself, lose some of what we've always had, to gain more, are we willing to make that sacrifice for the cause of Christ? Head and heart. Are we ready intellectually? Are we ready emotionally, spiritually? If not, why not? What's going on? Sometimes those checks are good, and sometimes those checks are just because we don't want to be discomforted. Got to be careful. A, approachable and applicable. Are the changes achievable? Can they be done? Are they something that are short-term, easier changes needed up front in order to be able to gain momentum for changes in the future? Sometimes you've got to be really careful about the pace of change. You want to make sure you're going at the speed of God and not the speed of you or the speed of anybody else. But you've got to prayerfully discern God's timing on this. Are the changes there just to make changes? Are you doing this because you're bored? Are you making changes so you can exert some sort of leadership moxie about you, or do they present? Is there really a true obstacle that the church is facing? Is it an obstacle that's keeping people from really coming to Christ without compromising the gospel? That's what we've got to recognize, because sometimes our church eyes don't see everything that needs to see. That's where we're coming back to blind spots. Are they navigable? Navigable. That's a really difficult word to say. Navigable. Sounds like you got something going on there. But are we as church leaders ready to communicate where we shall navigate? And that's where fear can come in for the leader. The leader may see very clearly what's going on here, but is there a forum and is there a courage that we have to be able to show how we're going to be able to navigate through some of these things? Do you have church leaders that are around you that are invested and see the changes as well to be able to help you navigate that? Because you're going to need some people with you that are going to help calm the storm. Sometimes, especially if you're a pastor it takes a while for you not to be seen as the outsider. So you need people that are on the inside that will be able to help you to navigate those troublesome waters that may end up coming up. Otherwise, you're just going to want to stay docked in that safe harbor. When we do notice and pull out of that safety of the harbor, will we as church leaders recognize the needed pace by which we need to navigate? Because it's not just about our pace. We've got to make sure that we bring as many people along as possible, and not everyone will come along. I mean, if you have people say, I will not disciple other people, that's not what I signed up for, and Jesus is telling us to disciple. Or I don't like what you preached out of the word that really hurt me. Well, do you pull back on that? Or do you lean into what God is having to say from his word? Now, obviously, we've got to be careful what we say in application and response to what the word is saying when we preach. But if the word itself is what's getting folks, then that's where we've got to be very, very careful. We speak the truth in love, but we still got to speak the truth. That's what we've got to recognize. Are we willing to be led by the Spirit so that we have ears to hear and eyes to see? So that's navigable. You got to find a way. If there's something that God has put on your heart, you got to find a way to go through it. Pressing on, gradual with gravity. And again, this is the pace. Will we recognize the necessary pace, which is already talked about with navigation, but will we recognize the necessary pace? And that takes wisdom. And that takes making sure that you're hearing from what others are saying. The last one is this: edifying and engaging. Are we willing to grow on the inside, which means to edify, to build up, and to go on in the outside engaging others about the things of Christ? So we've come full circle to Christ. Christ is the center. Christ is the perimeter, where we're growing in him, but also with our culture. The culture of our church needs to be moving forward to where we are going for him and we are being sent in his name to our various spheres of influence, our friends, our relatives, our associates, our neighbors. We do so by engaging his word, engaging him in prayer, engaging his people, and engaging the lost. So was that something that will work for you? Is that something that you'll be able to do? I'm going to repeat these. Christ and community, head and heart, approachable and applicable, navigable, gradual with gravity, conveying that weightiness of what needs to be done, and edifying and engaging. We have to be able to move forward in the courage that God has given to us. And if he's pressing something on us from his word, we would be in sin not to press that forward and to be able to help and be able to communicate and to navigate through all of these things that need to be done as Christ works to build his church in and through us. Let me know what you think. Talk to you soon.